Hello everyone and welcome. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the roaming playmaker role in Football Manager, and let's get started with an overview of the role. The roaming playmaker is a midfield role that can not only be played in the central and defensive midfield areas, but it can also be used in a variety of formations. Like other defensive midfield playmakers, he wants to use his attributes like passing and vision to create scoring chances for his teammates. And much like the midfield playmakers, he'll try to get into the final third, looking to capitalize on any scoring chances. However, unlike those other roles, the roaming playmaker is a much more physically demanding role and means he will close down the ball much like a traditional midfielder. And the key element to this role is that he's a roaming playmaker. This means he's going to go all over the field, whether it's to receive a pass or to close down the ball. And my favorite interpretation of the role is that he's a box-to-box midfielder mixed with a playmaker. But you're probably wondering what's the difference between a roaming playmaker and some of the other playmakers. Well, a deep-lying playmaker won't roam from his position and prefers to stay in the defensive and central midfield areas. Roaming playmaker will naturally roam from his position. A regista will roam from his position, but he won't venture too far into the attacking midfield or final third, but the roaming playmaker will. This is a passing chart, and on the left is the regista and everywhere he received a pass. And on the right is the roaming playmaker and everywhere he received a pass. The regista does more in the midfield and wider areas, but you see how the roaming playmaker is getting far into the final third to get passes from his teammates, in addition to the help in the midfield. And the advanced playmaker won't be dropping as deep into the defensive midfield as the roaming playmaker, and they aren't as aggressive in how they close down the ball. So he has elements of all the other playmaking roles as well as a more traditional midfielder. And now that we know what the role does, coming up we're going to look at a tactic, then my ideal roaming playmaker, and then wrap it up with maybe the greatest highlight that I've seen that showcases what a roaming playmaker can do. For the tactic today, we are with Sunderland in the English Championship, where we've had a great start to the season. The tactic is a 3-5-2 with a roaming playmaker as the lone defensive midfielder. The idea with this tactic is I wanted to get the roaming playmaker in space, so that's why I have him as the lone defensive midfielder. But you always want to think about defensive cover when using a roaming playmaker because he's going to be closing down the ball and getting out of position. This is why I chose a back three formation to provide that structure. And now there's two parts I want to talk about, and the first is the tactical instructions. You may have heard about the idea of building a tactic around a player or a player role. Well, this Sunderland tactic is an example of that. I have a low block and no press because the roaming playmaker will close down the ball anyway, so I want the rest of the team to sit back and stay in their shape rather than being pulled out of their position trying to close down the ball. I already have one player who's going to be way out of position most of the time. I don't want the rest of the team doing that too. And sometimes I find if you have a more aggressive press selected, so maybe close down more, in combination with the roaming playmaker, you can start to leave gaps in your defense. The other part I want to talk about is the player roles, because there are more attacking roles in this tactic than I would normally use, but there is a good reason for that. Originally, I was using a central midfielder on the defend duty in the midfield to pair with our central midfielder on the attack duty. I did this because I thought it would create a balanced midfield. We have an attack, support, and defend duty all in the midfield. Well, the issue I was having is that the central midfielder on defend duty would hold his position in the midfield like he's supposed to do, but he was getting in the way of the roaming playmaker. And again, my goal for this tactic is to get the roaming playmaker in space. In this clip, my roaming playmaker is dropping deep to get the ball, but the central midfielder on defend duty keeps getting in the way. There are numerous ways to try and fix this issue within your tactic. You can switch the player roles around. The roaming playmaker is versatile in that he can go wherever in the midfield. So what I decided to do is have the two central midfielders on an attack duty and basically telling them to get out of the way of the roaming playmaker when we have possession of the ball. This space that they're leaving open in the midfield is exactly what I want because now the roaming playmaker can go wherever he wants without teammates getting in his way. Here's an example of that change, and as we're building up from the back, My left central midfielder, who's now on the attack duty, is pushing up the field. Now you can see the amount of space the roaming playmaker has. After a couple of passes, we're already in the opponent's penalty box. This change improves our attack, but like everything in Football Manager, there's a trade-off, and now because we have more players pushing up, we will be susceptible to a counterattack. This is a risk I'm willing to take because, again, I'm trying to get the roaming playmaker as that defensive midfielder, so I'm fine with it. Hopefully that helps you when trying to get your roaming playmaker to work. Maybe it's just like me where you have players getting in his way. For the Sunderland tactic, most of the time we've been using Joe Bellingham as the roaming playmaker. He's got good first touch, passing, and technique, which are all attributes you want in a playmaker. But he also has anticipation, composure, and work rate. Joe Bellingham has been really good for us this season, and I expect in a few years he's going to turn into a really great player. But if you want that elite roaming playmaker now, well then for that, we're going to have to head to Spain. Jude Bellingham to me is the perfect roaming playmaker. Yes, every attribute is basically world class with him, but the dribbling, passing, technique, off the ball, and vision are all standout attributes for playmaking. And he has the defensive attributes needed for this role as well. Much like Messi and the trequartista, Jude Bellingham is the archetype for the roaming playmaker. Someone with the playmaking, defensive, and fitness attributes to play this role to near perfection. Plus, with his player traits, gets into opposition area and runs with ball, he basically turns into a roaming playmaker but with an attack duty. Using the same tactic as Sunderland, meaning the roaming playmaker is the sole defensive midfielder, here he is playing like an attacking midfielder running in on goal. On this one, note how he's literally the furthest outfield player back before using his playmaking ability to dribble past the defense and square the ball in the box. But I teased it earlier, and this next highlight is the prototypical roaming playmaker. A play where he's going to do all the dirty work and be a key part of the goal, even if he doesn't show up on the score sheet. The opponent is on the counter, breaking towards our goal. The roaming playmaker is sprinting back to help the defense out. Our team stabilizes, but the opponent is still able to work the ball into the box. But Bellingham makes a crucial tackle to win the ball back and start the counter himself. Right now, we don't have any advantage. Most of the players are still back from trying to stop the counter, but Bellingham dribbles on and makes a key pass into the midfield. Now our counter is on, and Bellingham gets into the opposition area with his player trait. We have numbers in the box and score the goal. As we watch the replay again in full speed, pay attention to the roaming playmaker and how integral he was to every single aspect of the play, even though he didn't get the assist or score the goal. And I get it, it's Real Madrid, it's the best team, it's the best players, but if I'm being honest, sometimes that's the best way to see how these roles are supposed to work. If you're new to making a tactic or unsure of player roles, try a top team. Often that's the best way to see if your tactic is really working. And as we wrap up, even though we've been talking about the roaming playmaker as a lone defensive midfielder, if you're using him in one of these offset positions, his play is going to be basically the same, but his movement and positioning will be more towards the side you place him on. For example, here's the roaming playmaker as a left central midfielder, and he's on that left side, making himself available for the ball, but still using that playmaking ability. Again, if you're having issues with the roaming playmaker in your tactic, I would double check your player roles and specifically the other player roles in the midfield and see if you can find a combination to where you can utilize the roaming playmaker's ability to go all over the field. And that is all for today's video. The roaming playmaker is probably one of the most difficult roles to get working in your tactic, but if you can find the right system and the right player, then this can be one of the most destructive roles in the game. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.